It was raining the morning that Abraham Zapruder arrived at the office located at 501 Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. He was the CEO of Jennifer Juniors, a garment factory that made cheap alternatives to high-end women's fashion of the day. It was a business he had started with an old friend a few years before, moving all the way from New York to set up the company. The plant was up and running at full capacity. Rows of young seamstresses were whittling away at their work, making dresses for next spring. After a brief inspection of their work, Abe sat down in his office at the back of the floor. His assistant Lillian Rogers brought him coffee, and together they discussed business. They were later joined by receptionist Marilyn and business administrator Irwin.
By the way, did you bring your camera?
Asked Lillian.
No, I decided not to. There'll probably be too many people. Impossible to see the president.
I agree.
Interrupted Irwin.
When he comes around that corner and makes that run onto Elm, they'll be going over 100 miles an hour. You won't get to see anything.
They are, of course, talking about the motorcade coming through the city that afternoon. President John F. Kennedy was in town to settle a dispute between Texas's segregationist governor and its more progressive senator. And afterwards, Kennedy would be driving through the city in an open-top motorcade, and right by the Elm Street offices where Abraham worked. Which was exciting, because Abe was an enthusiastic fan of the president, and had voted Democrat in every election since Roosevelt in 1932.
Hey, why don't you get your camera instead?
But you're the one who makes the beautiful movies. Come on, Mr. Z, please.
It's true, Abe was an avid filmmaker. Since the 1930s, he had been taking photographs and home movies as his #1 hobby. Abe eventually relinquished and drove home to fetch his camera. Lillian took to the company PA system.
This is your captain speaking. Today's lunch break will be doubled, so y'all can go see the president pass by.
I don't care if you're a Protestant or a Republican. It ain't every day you get to see the president.
Most of their employees were not Democrats. Dallas voted overwhelmingly against Kennedy at the last election, and the deep Protestant South was wary of the Northern Catholic commander-in-chief. The staff broke for lunch at 11:45. Marilyn, a Republican, went to open a bank account, and Irwin went to attend a meeting across town. That left Abe and Lillian to argue over who was going to look after the shop while everyone was away. Abe handed Lillian the camera and told her to film it. Lillian refused and demanded Abe go instead. The crowds on Elm Street were too thick to film the president clearly, especially for a short man like Abe, so Abe walked down to Dealey Plaza, where he could stand on the grassy hillside and watch the whole plaza from above. It was here that he was joined by Marilyn, who could not open a bank account because all the banks were closed for lunch. She agreed to steady Abraham as he stood up on a concrete block to film the scene. The president's motorcade slipped around the corner. Abe raised the camera to his eye and hit the record button. For about 7 seconds he captures the police escort, then stops. Then as the limousine comes into view, he begins filming again. In the rear seat is President John F. Kennedy, looking young and handsome as he brushes some hair from his face. First Lady Jackie Kennedy is in the seat next to him, waving to the crowds. The Governor of Texas is in the middle seat, and the First Lady of Texas next to him. The rain was gone, the sun was out, the conditions were perfect. In a few years, Abe thinks, I will show my grandchildren this film.
Oh my God, they killed him.
A Secret Service agent leaps onto the back of the car as it speeds off into the underpass. Marilyn keels over and retches. Abe releases the recording button. He looked around. He was one of the few people standing upright. Everyone else had hit the deck. The whole ordeal took less than 30 seconds. Abraham Zapruder was born in 1905 in Koval, at the time part of the Russian Empire. That same year, Russian Emperor Tsar Nicholas II approved a modest, liberal reform of the Russian political system. Autocratic hardliners were outraged, taking out their frustrations on the Jewish population of Russia. Roving gangs on horseback would gallop from village to village, committing unspeakable acts against anyone perceived to be Jewish. When Abraham was 4 years old, his father fled to the United States, with the promise of retrieving the rest of them when he had the chance. But for 9 more years, the Zapruder family had no choice but to endure the awful conditions of Tsarist Russia. In 1916, Austrian and German forces began an artillery barrage on the town, and the ensuing Battle of Kovel took the lives of tens of thousands of men in the most lethal offensive of the First World War. More than the violence was the hunger. Abe and his siblings would often argue about who got to eat the fragile skin that formed on a pot of boiling milk. Sometimes the only thing for dinner would be a single potato for 6 people. Then in 1918 they received word that his father had successfully registered for the draft to obtain US citizenship, and had organised for a transport to take his wife and children to America. The journey took 2 years, as the family struggled with visas and entry permits in the shifting borders of post-war Europe. On a train ride through Poland, Abraham's older brother was pulled from the train by Polish military police and murdered. Despite all the setbacks, the family arrived at Ellis Island, New York City, in 1920. Abe didn't have much in the way of education. He had been excluded from school in Russia due to strict quotas on the number of Jewish students, and struggled to find a job in the first few months in America. Instead, he began work in a sweatshop garment factory, learning how to make dresses and print patterns for long hours in fusty 1920s New York. But his life was far from miserable. He was ceaselessly amazed by the country of his adoption. When his father fell ill, he couldn't believe that there were dedicated cars to take people to the hospital. Laundromats and sewing machines made his work 10 times easier. He could afford holidays to go hiking in the many forests north of New York City. And, as he found out in his mid-20s, he had a passion for photography, eventually switching to filming home movies in the mid-1930s.
Did you get it? You caught the shooting? I'll buy it from you.
Abe was broken from his panic by Harry McCormick, a reporter for the Dallas Morning News.
I will not speak about this film with anyone except federal authorities,
said Abe, clutching his camera tighter.
I know where to find the Secret Service. I'll go find them. Just promise me you won't sell that film to anyone else.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade group.
President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassin's bullets.
He is reported to be fighting for his life
after being shot by an unknown assailant.
Police and FBI men search for the assassin.
2 priests who were with President Kennedy say he is dead.
President Kennedy has been assassinated.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I got it all on here,
he announced to his employees, holding up the camera. The employees took no notice. They had gathered around the television to watch the news. None of them knew Kennedy was dead. They hadn't been there. Abe's first thought was to call his son Henry, who worked at the local Justice Department.
The president is dead.
Dad, that's not true.
The radio said he's been taken to Parkland Hospital.
He's dead. I saw his head explode.
Then arrived Marilyn, bringing with her Mr. Darwin Payne of the Dallas Times-Herald. Payne had been interviewing Marilyn and a few other witnesses about what they had seen of the shooting, and Marilyn had revealed she had helped Zapruder film the entire event. Of course, being the first reporter to obtain pictures of the tragedy would have made Payne's career, so he requested to be taken to Zapruder. When Marilyn and Payne arrived, Abe had finished his phone call, but was inconsolable. He kept crying, kicking the desk, screaming about how they had shot the man like a dog and how this wasn't supposed to happen in America. Payne crouched by the desk.
Mr. Zapruder, let's take the... Abraham, come with me to the Times-Herald to get it developed. Then we can take it to the Secret Service. Look, I can call my publisher. I'll offer you $1,000. No, $2,000 for the film.
Then, 2 cops from the Dallas police arrived, carrying shotguns, demanding to see the film immediately. But Abe refused, screaming about how he will only cooperate with federal authorities. Then Irwin returns from his business meeting and begins shouting at everyone.
What's going on here?
That is criminal evidence.
Leave the man alone.
Get out.
I can call my publisher. I'll offer you $1,000. No, $2,000 for the film.
Police business.
Throughout all this commotion, Darwin Payne noticed that the camera was just sitting there on a filing cabinet, completely ignored by everyone else in the office. The thought of stealing it briefly crossed his mind. All he'd have to do was calmly pick it up and leave while everyone was distracted. We can let the newspaper's legal team figure out the...
Everybody, shut up.
A new figure had emerged in the now overflowing office. Dallas Secret Service Chief Forrest Sorrells, who had been found by Harry McCormick.
I'm in charge here. You have the shooting and that camera?
I do, and I'd like for you to have it.
We'll see if we can get it developed. Anyone know where?
Well, actually,
Dallas Morning News offices. I worked there. We've printed film before.
All right, let's move.
Abe, Irwin, Forrest, Harry, and one of the cops all piled into the squad car and zoomed off into the now deserted streets of afternoon Dallas. Payne was escorted out of the workshop and towards the building the shots had come from to continue his investigations. A couple miles across town, 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald is stopped by Officer J.D. Tippett of Dallas Police and questioned about where he is going and what he is doing. Oswald panics and shoots Tippett 3 times in the chest and once in the head for good measure. He then flees the scene and hides out in a local movie theater. When Zapruder and co. arrived at the Dallas Morning News office, nobody there wanted to risk damaging the film. Their equipment was for printing photographs, not film. But next door was the local ABC affiliate station, WFAA-TV, who printed amateur film all the time for show on television. While Sorrells negotiated with studio directors, one of the producers tagged on that Zapruder was the one to have filmed the shooting. They quickly pulled Abe on the air.
A gentleman just walked in our studio that I am meeting for the first time as well as you. This is WFAA-TV in Dallas, Texas. May I have your name, please, sir?
My name is Abraham Zapruder.
And would you tell us your story, please, sir?
I got out and about a half hour earlier and getting us a good spot to shoot some pictures. There was another girl from my office. She was right behind me. And as I was shooting, I heard a shot. And he slumped to the side like this. At first I thought perhaps it sounded like somebody make a joke. You hear a shot and somebody grabs their stomach. Then I heard another shot or two. I couldn't say whether it was 1 or 2. And I saw his head practically open up, all blood and everything. And I kept on shooting. That's about all. I'm just sick. I
think that pretty well expresses the entire feeling.
ABC could not process the 8mm colour film that Abe had used in his camera. They only worked in 16mm black and white. If anyone should be allowed to process this film, it should be the Eastman Kodak Lab near Dallas Love Field Airport. As Zapruder stepped back into the squad car, a plane roared overhead. It was Air Force One taking off for Washington, D.C. On board was Lyndon Johnson, taking the oath of office to become the 36th President of the United States. Despite being a Baptist, he swore on a Catholic prayer book, as there was no Bible to hand. Jackie Kennedy stood next to him, still covered in her husband's blood. She had declined to change before takeoff. Several feet behind her is the coffin of John F. Kennedy. The Kodak lab was closed, and the parking lot was deserted. Due to the shooting, management had declared a day of mourning, and most of the employees had gone home. Only a skeleton crew remained, processing the photographs and films of over 30 different people who had captured the shooting in one way or another. It was the manager on duty, Phil Chamberlain, who agreed to process the Zapruder film himself. Throughout the whole process, Abe never let the film out of his sight. All the while, McCormick was pestering him to sell the film once it had been developed.
Yes? Speaking? Yes. Good, you did right. I'll be there as soon as possible. Folks, they think they caught the assassin. I have to go, but promise me you'll get me a copy of that film when it's done.
After an hour, the film was complete. They ran the film into the company projector and displayed it on the wall, first cycling through all the other contents on the reel. Home movies of birthdays, Hanukkah, children playing in the yard.
I'm sorry,
said Abe.
I'm not much of a photographer.
After the home videos, the point of revelation arrived. The green grass of Dealey Plaza splashed on the screen. Abraham Zapruder had filmed the shooting of President Kennedy. It was the clearest, closest, most comprehensive of all the films taken that day.
Oh my God.
Can we see it again?
Asked Abe, but he was outvoted by the other people present. They didn't want the film to be damaged.
We should have a copy or two made before we play it again,
somebody suggested. But the Kodak lab couldn't make copies. For that, they decided to drive across town to a local film production company called Jamieson Film so that they could make some duplicates. As they left, Zapruder fumbled for change, but Chamberlain stopped him.
We wouldn't make any charge for that.
On the way, Harry McCormick was still trying to negotiate a price for the film, and was now getting on everyone's nerves.
You can give one to the cops and sell one to me.
So they pulled over to boot him out of the car. Feeling cheated, McCormick stumbled over to a phone booth and called his friend at Life magazine.
How much you paying for information right now?
$200, maybe $300. Why? You got something?
Well, I can give you the name of the fellow who caught the whole shooting on film for a price.
At the Jamieson Film Company, CEO Bruce Jamieson himself made 3 copies of the Zapruder film. Abe couldn't remember the exposure level his camera had been set to, so each copy was made at a slightly different contrast to ensure that at least one would be perfect. Irwin and Abe thanked him for the trouble before driving back to Kodak to get the copies developed. It was at the Kodak lab that they realised they had not eaten since breakfast, and it was now the early evening. From a vending machine, Irwin and Abe purchased cans of chili beans and ate them as the technician ran each copy through the projector to test them. All remaining employees at Kodak were anxious to watch. Finally, Abe and Irwin drove to the Dallas Police headquarters, where Lee Harvey Oswald was being detained. Right as they arrived, Oswald was being transferred between cells, and it was total chaos. Cops, federal agents, journalists, witnesses, secretaries. Irwin later recalled that it sounded like a zoo. Abe handed 2 copies of the film to the front desk, retaining the original and 1 copy for himself. Copy 1, the underexposed version, was given to the Dallas Secret Service. Copy 3, the overexposed version, was sent on a plane to the Secret Service headquarters in DC that same night. Irwin drove back to Jennifer Jr.'s and showed Abe to his car, parked in a nearby lot. 3 scruffy reporters had been waiting there all day and now leaped into action, offering him $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 for the film. Abe, having been pestered by reporters trying to buy the film all day, was absolutely not in the mood. He politely told them to f*** off, got in his car, and drove away. He was now alone for the first time that day. The nightmare of getting the film to the authorities was over. The new nightmare, what to do with the film now, was just beginning. He was now the ashamed owner of the most important film in American history, and thinking about that burden was simply too much for Abraham. He had to get rid of it. Pulling up in the driveway, he sat for a moment. His eyes were sore from crying, his throat dry from yelling. After an entire day of people arguing with each other, he was left with ringing in his ears. Inside was his wife Lillian, their adult daughter Myrna, and her husband Myron. They had planned to have a meal together that night, but the table was empty. Their plans scuppered as the Zapruders and the Kennedys' lives became inextricably linked forever. Abe fumbled around in the closet for the family projector. Pulling it out and setting it up, his family soon realized what he was doing. Myrna refused to watch, bursting into tears and storming out of the room. Abe played the film to his wife and son-in-law. The family films came first, then, like in real life, their peaceful American suburban dream had been interrupted by a national tragedy. They sat in silence for a moment. It was Richard Stolley of Life magazine. He had received word from somebody that a Mr. Z had filmed the assassination, and had instructions from his bosses to find that man and buy the film at no matter the cost. Stolley had then spent the whole afternoon calling everyone in the Dallas phone book under the Z section.
Hello?
Mr. Z, is it true you photographed the assassination?
Yes.
Did you get the entire sequence from beginning to end?
Yes.
Have you seen the film?
Yes.
Mr. Z, can I come over now and see it?
No.
That night, Abe had a nightmare. The first of many reoccurring dreams that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He was standing in Times Square, and every billboard had been replaced by a frame of the film. At one end of the street, a sleazy hawker in a double-breasted suit was beckoning people into a cinema.
Step right up, step right up. Come and see the president's head explode. Come see the president murdered on the big screen.
Abe marched over to the salesman, furious about this flagrant profiteering from the president's death, but as he approached, the salesman's face became clearer. The next day was a Saturday, but it wasn't a day off for Abe. He had been called by the Secret Service to request another screening, and Abe agreed to show them at Jennifer Jr.'s. Upon arrival were 2 Secret Service agents and Richard Stolley, the man from last night's phone call. Abe sighed and let them in, setting up a projector in his office. He played them the film, again, now the 5th time that Abe had watched his political hero be brutally murdered on screen.
Christ.
There is no goddamn way I'm leaving this building without that film, thought Stolley. While Abe answered questions from the Secret Service about where he was standing and what speed the camera was running at, more and more journalists had accumulated in the reception of Jennifer Jr.'s. A certain somebody had been calling tip-off lines for newspapers, newsreels, magazines, movie studios. Everyone wanted to bid for the rights to show the film to the world. They were hammering on the door, sliding under notes, shouting,
"Talk to us before you make a decision. Promise you won't sign anything."
Abe exited the office and gathered the reporters to the shop floor.
Thank you all for coming. However, since Richard Stolley of Life magazine was the first person to ask for the rights to this picture, I will be negotiating with him first.
This was a lie. Harry McCormick had asked him for the rights literally seconds after the shooting. Darwin Payne had attempted negotiations before the Secret Service arrived yesterday, and there were the stalkers who had been waiting by Abe's car all yesterday afternoon. But Zapruder didn't feel like showing the film to each reporter like some cheap tourist attraction. The nightmare was still fresh in his mind. And besides, Life magazine was an institution, a highly respected publication. If Abe could be sure that anyone would treat this film with the dignity it deserves, Life would be it. Abe and Stolley eventually settled on a sum of $50,000 for the possession of and print rights for the original film, while Abe would keep copy 2 and the film rights, for the time being. Outside, the reporters were getting angrier. They began insulting the secretary Lillian, pushing her around and shoving business cards in her face. One reporter ran down the street to a phone booth and called Jennifer Juniors, attempting to interrupt the meeting. Abe signed off on the hastily typed contract and handed over the film reel. Stolle took the fire escape, while Abe was left to deal with the angry mob occupying his factory. He told them that he had sold the print rights to Life for $50,000. But if they would return on Monday, he would give them all a fair chance to see the film and then bid on the rights to the final copy. So whatever happened to those other copies anyway? Well, the original was sent by Richard Stolle via courier flight to Chicago, where Life editors worked non-stop for 6 days, completely reworking their entire November 29th issue. Frames from the film were sized up and printed in high contrast black and white. During the editing process, several frames were damaged, a fact which continues to fuel conspiracies to this day. Eventually, the images made it to coffee tables across America, which came as a shock to the FBI in Washington, who hadn't even seen the film yet, because copy 1, which went to the Dallas Secret Service, was loaned to the Dallas FBI on Friday evening, but Dallas FBI did not tell the FBI headquarters they had seen the film. FBI HQ only found out there was a film when angry media reports began leaking about how Zapruder was refusing to sell the footage. The FBI requested the film from the Dallas branch and received a copy in due time. Copy 3, which went to the Secret Service in DC, was handed off to the CIA to make large copies of, so that both organizations could then analyze the frames up close. The problem with making copies of a copy is that the quality deteriorates with each transfer, especially since this was the overexposed version. In December 1963, the Warren Commission, the federal commission tasked with investigating the assassination, requested to borrow the original from Life magazine to make a better copy. That leaves copy 2 as the only day one copy of the film not to end up in the hands of the federal government. On Monday morning, the reporters piled into the office of Abraham Zapruder's lawyer. Many had shown up, but realistically, only 2 were likely to win the auction. Dan Rather, representing CBS News, or Richard Stolle of Life magazine. The rules of the auction were simple. You will watch the film one at a time. You will get to view the film once. You will not be allowed to take notes. You will then leave the room and make your bid for the rights, and the highest bidder will win. Most of the journalists played by the rules, except Dan Rather. Previously, CBS told Rather to run in, punch Zapruder, steal the film, get a copy made at the local CBS studio, then return the film with an apology card so that he'd only have to plead guilty to assault and get away with only a few weeks in jail. Rather was allegedly enthusiastic about this idea, until the plan was vetoed by his boss. But either way, he was determined not to play by the rules. Immediately after seeing the film, he asked to be excused so that he could make a phone call, and instead ran straight across town to the CBS studios and went live on air to give a completely inaccurate account of what he had just seen, providing fodder for countless conspiracy theorists to prove that Rather had seen the real film and not the fake one made by the CIA.
In the next instant, with this time Mrs. Kennedy apparently looking on, a second shot, the third total shot, hit the president's head. His head could be seen to move violently forward.
While they had been waiting for Dan's return, Abe told Richard about the nightmare he had, about how he wasn't worried about the film being public, but he was worried about charging too much or too little. Too much and the abuse would roll in, accusing him of being greedy and profiting from the president's death. It had been 43 years since Abe left Russia, but the wounds of prejudice had cut him deep. As expected, Life magazine had won the auction. Abe didn't care about how rich he had just become. he was just relieved to no longer be responsible for the dreaded film. But before they sealed the deal, Zapruder made Stolle agree to several conditions. Life magazine would pay Abraham Zapruder $150,000 for all rights to use the film. That includes the $50,000 already paid for the print rights. 2. $25,000 of that amount will be sent to the widow of J.D. Tippit, the policeman killed by Lee Harvey Oswald during his escape. 3. Life magazine would treat the film with dignity and respect. Frame 313, showing the exact moment of the fatal bullet's impact, will not be published. 4. Life magazine will defend the copyright of the film and will aggressively pursue any unauthorized publishings. 5. Abraham Zapruder will have a cut of the profits to any commercial use of the film. They signed off on the contract, and Abe handed over the final copy. Abraham Zapruder was just one of 32 people who caught the Kennedy slaying on film or photograph. But by sheer misfortune, Abe had taken the clearest footage of the shooting, changed American history forever, turbocharged Americans' distrust in their government, and spoiled his family's name forever. He set out that day to make a home movie for his family. Instead, he ensured their financial security for decades to come. He wished he never had. He would never make another home movie for the rest of his life. I wrote this video myself, but I would be dishonest if I didn't mention that the information is adapted from the first 3 chapters of 26 Seconds by Alexandra Zapruder, the granddaughter of Abraham. It covers not just the day of the assassination as depicted here, but also the ensuing decades as the family are caught up in conspiracies and controversies surrounding the event. So if you found this video interesting, I highly recommend it. Link in the description, or preferably, support your local library. And this video could not have been made without the help of many talented people who lent their voices to the people depicted. Also, the many intelligent and handsome patrons who give me their hard-earned money to make this stuff.